got to go to Lisa Nandy first, who's been patiently waiting. Good to see you, Lisa. I might talk to you about energy in a minute, but I've just got to start with the Labour story of the moment, which is, I mean, broadly, is Keir Starmer right to change the system for electing the leader now?
Well, he's very clear that what he wants to do is turn outwards to the country. And in order to do that, we've got to get our rules fit for purpose to make sure that we are rooted in our communities, that we have got the right processes in place, and that we're able to do that. And I think he's right to say he's got to seize the first opportunity that he's got to do that. This is this week at conference, because we haven't had a conference since he was elected leader, and that's where our rule changes take place. And I think every Labour leader since I've been elected in 11 years has tried to do the same thing. Jeremy Corbyn did it, Ed Miliband did it. He's having a conversation with the trade unions and the broader membership about that at the moment. And he's very open to listening to suggestions about how we should do it. But I think he's certainly right to say that there are millions of ordinary trade unionists who were disenfranchised when we changed the rules before. It's important that we're rooted in the lives of ordinary working class people. We should have a very close relationship with our trade union members, and that's one of the key reasons why he's keen to make these changes at this conference.
And just to be clear, you totally back that decision to turn inwards at a time when many would say there are so many crises afflicting this country that that's what he should be talking about?
I wouldn't support a decision to turn inwards. I think this is about precisely the opposite. It's about turning outwards to the country. One of the changes that he's proposing is that we have less onerous processes for reselecting MPs. If you remember, Jeremy was very keen to make it easier to deselect MPs. The upshot of that was that most of us in the run-up to the 2019 election spent months and months with our members going through a very onerous process in which we were all overwhelmingly reselected by the majority of members. If we hadn't been doing that, I don't think I would be in a position now sitting here in Wigan as one of the few red seats left looking out to a sea of blue. I think we should be out there campaigning. I think we should be taking our message to the country.
But one more question on this. Just one more quick question on this, Lisa, before we have to go to the break. If, and this has got to be a very real risk, he fails to get the leadership election rules changed next week, his authority will be fatally undermined, won't it?
I just think we've got to go away from this kind of slightly daft macho politics. Keir is not that sort of politician. He stood on a platform of unity. I know that because I stood in the same contest with him and listened to what he had to say very closely. He believes in uniting the Labour Party and looking outwards to the country and building bridges across different groups in the country to end this decade of division and to move forwards. And that's why he's approached this in the way that he has. He's proposed to the party that this is what he wants to do. He spent the day talking to our trade union friends and colleagues about that. He's open to suggestions. If this is something that people feel that they have reservations about and they have alternative proposals, I can tell you, because I've spoken to him in the last 24 hours, that he is absolutely keen to have a dialogue and a discussion and reach the right outcome for the Labour Party. OK,
well, as you can imagine, I'm not sure that your colleague, John McDonnell, sees this as a unifying approach. But I'm going to talk to John after the break, and I'm going to come back to Lisa after the break. So much to discuss. Don't go away. So, Lisa, how do you win back those wavering Tory voters?
Well, I think, first of all, we've got to show that we're interested in winning them back. It means showing a level of respect for people. I've certainly felt for a very long time that people often feel about Labour that we talk down to them, that we're not interested in their own lives and their own aspirations. And I know that you, Robert, and others have slightly joked about Keir's very long pamphlet that he's publishing, but actually it's the result of a summer that's been spent going to communities across the country, listening to what people have to say. And out of that has come this big idea about a country in which everybody has a part, a role, a contribution to make that is valued and supported by a future Labour government. And I think that's really important, because in the past we've come forward with some really exciting plans sometimes for what we're going to do to or for people. But actually what people are much more interested in is how you're going to support me to live the life I want, to help ensure that my kids don't have to get out to get on, that they can have good jobs and a contribution to make in the place that they call home. And that's very much at the core of Keir's pamphlet and what he's going to say to conference this week.
So, yes, that's right. I mean, as I understand it, what he wants to build is this thing called a contribution society. It's not the most stirring slogan I've ever heard.
Well, I mean, I guess that partly reflects the fact that Keir is, unlike the Prime Minister, far more interested in how than in slogans. And, you know, you look at many of Boris Johnson's big slogans, get Brexit done. We're still arguing about the Good Friday Agreement and where the border should be and border checks. You look at levelling up, and all we've seen is small pots of money being chucked out from Whitehall, which areas have to compete for rather than working together to raise us up together. And huge cuts to the cost of living for many working people around the country. You look at phrases like global Britain, and you've seen this week how hollow that is when the big idea around that, a trade deal with the United States, looks far more distant than ever. I think it's right that he's focusing in on how we're going to actually work with people and communities around the country, with businesses, with trade unions, a public-private partnership, in order to deliver that change that people badly want to see. And I read his pamphlet for the first time this afternoon. It's out later. I think it's really impressive the way that he's grasped that the future does not look like the world that we inherited in 1997. It looks very different to that. It looks like much more of a partnership between the state and people. And we're determined to be rooted in every community around the country and help them deliver it.
But Lisa, you may feel that the phrase "get Brexit done" was misleading, but it won Boris Johnson an absolute landslide, and you can do nothing unless you're in power. And so you may be dismissive of slogans, but actually they're quite useful.
Well, they're very useful in that they can convey a sense to people of what you are and what you're about. And I think it's right to say that when I spend time here at home and, you know, meeting people, talking to people, and in other parts of the country that have seen similarly 40 years of economic decline, people want to see, they want to make a contribution. They want to see a government that is actively helping them to realise their own ambitions, not telling them what those ambitions are. You know, here in Wigan, within Living Memory, we powered the world through the work in the mines. There are very few people who want to reopen the coal mines, but we do want to see those good, clean energy jobs, the solar, the wind, the battery technology, the research jobs, so that our young people can power us through the next generation like their parents and grandparents powered us through the last. And that's what contributions do.
All of this is about trying to, you know, bring people together. But your colleague, Rosie Duffield, who, you know, insists, and many would agree with her, is not remotely a transphobe, does not feel safe going to Labour conference. What does that tell you about the Labour Party?
Well, it's appalling that anybody could feel unsafe going to Labour conference. And I think Keir was right to say on behalf of the whole party that we will stand up to that sort of behaviour. Nobody should feel intimidated out of our politics. I come from that school of politics myself. I have profound disagreements with many people across the political spectrum. You know, many of the people who've been on your party, on your programme this evening, Ruth and I have had our moments. John and I have had our moments, but I respect their right to disagree with me. I think that's how we get better as a country. And I think Keir was right to stand up for that and say that we have to have these debates about.
But he hasn't made it safe for her to go, and that's a failure.
Well, you know, I'm very clear that Rosie is welcome at our conference, and I'll do everything that I can to support her to make sure that she is. And I'm also very clear that trans men and women are welcome in the Labour Party, and that we will always stand up for them and against the bigotry and discrimination that they face in society. I have a young person in my constituency who is going through this at the moment. 2 in 5 trans young people have attempted suicide. Yep. That should really give us pause for thought about how we're treating people. And social media is not our friend in all of this. We've got to take the heat out of some of these conversations, shed far, far more light, and start to tackle the real issues, like why it is that so many trans people across this country are waiting years for help and support on the National Health Service.
I completely, many people watching will completely agree with you, and the pernicious impact of social media on these important debates is something we should all be concerned about. Lisa, thanks for joining me. John